一个个好了，你说一声啊，我们才知道你外面接好了。Hi, Patrick.
Hi there, hi there. Good to see you guys.
How are you? What time is it in London right now?
In London, it's now exactly 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Great, great. Thanks for coming.
Sure, of course.
We spent the whole day so for the conference. Just finished.
Wow, wow.
Yeah. Our Dean here, Dean Li Zhenyu here.
喂，我听不到你的声音。喂，
喂，听得到吗？我听得到你的声音。我听得到。
喂，袁老师。
哎，我听得到你的声音，你的耳机可能有问题。你的耳机有问题。你的耳机有问题。你的耳机有没有插好？看一下。听得见吗？
喂。
对，我听得到你的声音，但是 ，yeah，我听得到你的声音。哎，我听得到你的声音，但你听不到，估计你的耳机有问题。
啊， 啊，好好，我再试试啊。OK，
OK，李可可接没接通？连线了吗？李可可？
菲利普袁，I want to say something or I
我
cannot
们
hear
还没
you,
连线，等一
but
下
I will
，wait a
try to
moment。
speak.
Yeah, wait a moment。李可可，你连线了吗？
我开始了啊。
那等一下，还没连线，还没连线，等一下。李可可
老师
在吗？
连好了，老师已经连好了。
OK。So，我先开个场吧啊。So today is a great day for we want to kick off digital future world. Yes， 可以听到吗？ Hi， 听得到吗？我们可以听到你说话，但是
那我就直接讲了，你听得到我是吧
？OK，
好，我可以讲了吗？
可以了。
好，OK。And the team from European, from Africa and Middle East. Good evening, my Yansong, Philip Yuan, and the team in Asia Pacific. My name is Li. I'm Dean and a professor from Tongji University College for Architecture and Urban Planning. I'm so glad to meet you in the crowd. And in last 9 years, 9 years, we always host the Digital Future Shanghai in Tongji campus. This is a T-shirt last year, but this year, because the COVID-19, we cannot meet face to face. The campus is empty, only a few students and the teacher. But our idea, our heart is not empty. Our cooperation is not empty. Our creative and contribution is not empty. And especially in this moment, in this way, we organize the crowd, the summer school, the digital future around the world. This year, instead of 12 teams, instead of 20 or more than 20 teachers like Patrik, Schumacher, like Philip Yuan, like Neil Leach, or Andreas, Sandra, or Archimangus, or Philip Bloch, or Picon, and so on. This time we have so many, almost 200 teachers around the world, 75 groups. And we have so many students or team member, more than 2,000, I guess, the nearby 3,000. This is also a special opportunity for us. I hope next year we can parallel have the face-to-face summer school and also the crowd school. It will be very, very exciting. And in my opinion, in my view, the digital future is a very, very important way for the architecture and the neighborhood, the design and the traffic and so on. But what we do, at least we can do two things. First, instead of only the experience, the arithmetic, the computer science, the intelligent of artificial system will help us to do more things. Second, instead of the very, very concrete the function, the special function, we have more sharing architecture possibilities. I'm now doing the second one, and Philip Yuan or Patrik Schumacher, or you are doing the first one. I think first one is a high class, is a high tech things. I'm a little bit jealous, but let's do together. I hope next year we can host the Digital Future Shanghai again in Tongji campus. this is the playground for the physical. And we also hope the crowd, the virtual, playground will help more young people to do more creation. Thank you, Patrik Schumacher. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Yansong. Thank you, all the team, and especially thank you, Philip Yuan.
Thanks a lot to Dean Lee. So in the last 5 years, or to 6 years, Dean Lee gave us a lot of support for the special event. At the same time, Tongji Design Institute also sponsored the last 9 year event as well. So I think at this special moment, I would like to especially forward our thanks to Dean support and also the support from Tongji Design Institute. I think it's a great honor for us to organize special event this year online. And especially today, we invited to a very important guest, Patrik Schumacher, who is the director, principal of Jaha Architects. And right now he's the president and leading the whole army from in Jaha, doing a lot of projects in the world. I think I want to especially mention in the last 5 years, Patrik Schumacher not only doing lots of projects all over the world, but also he is right now the PhD advisor in Tongji University. He is right now have 3 PhD students with him, and every year, every summer, he came to Shanghai and gave PhD courses to the students. I think that is extremely important. His contribution not only in the practice, but also help us to set up the PhD program in computation and robotic fabrication. I think that's his contribution as a philosopher, as a theorist, and as a practitioner as well. So I think today it's a great honor to have him here, and also Yansong, who is the first Chinese architect win the international competition and construct the building outside China through competition. He is also very young, as a young generation, and gave us a very special practice, and also his great deep thinking in architecture contribute to the contemporary practice as well. So firstly, I would like to use 5 minutes to review this year's events a little bit. So Digital Future World, the name for Digital Future this year goes to the international event. After the coronavirus, I talked to Neil Leach, and he is also stay at home. And he mentioned probably it's impossible we can organize the PhD courses and organize the Digital Future work. But when we goes to online teaching, I participate his studio and also Matthias Campos studio and also Patrik Schumacher studio. We review and find it's extremely efficient and special experience. We actually can go to the other courses online. So we're talking about if it's possible to set up this special moment to make online courses. And we send email to our friends who come to join us in the last 9 years. And it's interesting. All of them gave a lot of support to the thinking we should organize Digital Future online. So that's why it goes to this year. We actually have 75 workshops, 2,004 instructors from 33 countries and 91 institutions. I think that's really a big number. And all the instructors, I think they give a lot of contribution, send all their information, teaching schedule, syllabus, put them online, and the students apply for different workshops by themselves. So you can see this is the global map. The students actually from actually the advisors, instructors from all over the world, including, I think the maximum instructors is from the United States, including from Harvard, GSD, from Cornell, MIT, etc. And also we have some European
Hello，大家能听到我的声音吗？
可以，能听到。
袁老师的设备可能出了一点问题，现在正在调试，大家可以稍等一下。
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Before it was not working.
Okay, Patrick.
Yeah.
Maybe I think okay. So we will give New Leach will give an opening speech. After that, please we would like to invite you to make the lecture first because my Yansong is not finished with his presentation. So after New Leach.
Okay, good. Fine. I was actually working on my presentation.
This is very, very fresh. Very,
I was
fresh.
also still working, but that's okay. I'm just about done in 5 minutes. Okay, no problem.
Maybe. So, okay, let's invite New Leach to make a speech.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Neil Leach and I want to say a few words about Digital Futures World and how it happened. As many of you know, the first Digital Futures event happened back in 2011. Philip Yuan and I organised it. And in those days it was quite a small event, but over the years it's grown. Last year we had over 800 applications for Digital Futures, and this year we have over 12,000 applications. We are running almost 80 workshops and 30 talks and many lectures. So how did it all happen? Back in February of this year, Philip Yuan and I had a discussion, a Zoom conversation about the summer. And it soon became obvious to us that we wouldn't be able to have our usual events in Shanghai. We decided to cancel them. We decided to cancel also the PhD lectures. But then something interesting happened. In April, I held an online review of my design studio and invited Philip Yuan and Wan Yuhe from China to be among the jurors, and Gilles Retzin from London, and so on. This was something we could not have done before, not without having the whole thing online. 1 week later, Matthias Del Campo held his review in the University of Michigan. He streamed it online and attracted over 1,000 followers. Suddenly we began to realize something was happening. We'd always spoken about the digital future, about how the future would be digital, but suddenly it was here. We were holding Zoom meetings, Zoom teaching, Zoom reviews. We were ordering our food online, and we were paying for things with contactless payment. The future was already with us. So we decided to seize upon the opportunities afforded by the digital and to do something that had never been attempted before. We decided to go online and to go global. We issued a manifesto and we called upon architects around the world to come together in a spirit of solidarity to help one another. We called upon them to give their time for free and to teach the younger generation a series of workshops that at a scale never even imaginable. And it happened. We were delighted by the response we got from some of the leading instructors, from some of the leading universities and schools of architecture in the world who volunteered to give their time. And we were delighted by the number of students who also wanted to apply for this, by the standard of the students, a remarkably high standard. But we also wanted to do something else. It's very clear that we needed workshops, but also it seemed very important to address the issues related to COVID-19 and how it was changing architecture and urbanism. It was very clear, for example, that places like New York City, places that we had often looked up to as a very pinnacle of urban existence, were now suffering under COVID-19. People wanted to move to the countryside, wanted to move to the suburbs. Meanwhile, Los Angeles, often dismissed as the most unspeakable example of urban sprawl, suddenly became the perfect example of an urbanism of social distancing. Likewise, the house all of a sudden mutated into the office. It was interactive architecture in operation. The living room became the office and so on. the whole of architecture and urbanism was being reconfigured. So we decided to set up a whole series of talks, of panel discussions to address some of the issues that were facing architects in the age of COVID-19. Not simply the fact that many of us will be losing our jobs and there was a very uncertain future, but also to rethink the possibilities of what architecture might be, what urbanism might be, and indeed what education might be. Everything has a small beginning, and Digital Futures had a very small beginning, but it's grown. I'm reminded here of the story about the founding of my own college, Emmanuel College at the University of Cambridge, back in 1584, over 400 years ago now. When it was founded, Queen Elizabeth I planted an oak tree in a ceremony, and in a speech she commented, "I am planting an oak tree and who knows what fruit it will bear." A few years later, a young man graduated from Emmanuel College. His name was John Harvard. He took a boat to America and eventually left his library to a college near Boston, in Boston. Since then, that college has changed its name. It's now known as Harvard University. This year, we are running a workshop involving 4 professors from Harvard University who are teaching a workshop on theory called Intelligence. Sanford Quinter, Antoine Picon, and Marika Trotter are joining me for this workshop. And it's not just Harvard that has become part of this workshop. All the leading schools in the world, the Architectural Association, the Bartlett in London, UCLA, SIAC, University of Michigan, Tongji University, Tsinghua University, and so on. All of a sudden, it's turning into a kind of global venture. Maybe soon Digital Futures will be known as well as Harvard University is. Back in 1963, Martin Luther King had a dream. He had a dream about a future where everyone would be treated equal. In 2020, we too have a dream. We have a dream whereby we can provide education for everyone around the world for nothing, for free, regardless of how rich or poor or who they are or where they live, and so on. That itself is happening. But dreams remain just utopian dreams unless you can make it happen, unless you can make them happen. Indeed, architecture itself, as Roland Barthes has commented, is always a combination of utopian dreaming and realistic pragmatism. In order to make this dream happen, we've relied upon an incredibly enthusiastic and generous team of supporters. We have had an organizing committee who have given so much of their time, and I want to single out 3 individuals in particular who've been astonishing. They've worked night and day, literally nights sometime, over the last few weeks to make this happen. Biana Bogosian, Virginia Melnick, and Daniel Bolliger. But I'd like to thank all the committee, all the organizing committee, all the team, also in Shanghai, Philip Yuan, Yan Chao and others who've supported this. And I'd also like to thank those instructors, those professors, those architects from around the world, some of the very best in the world, who've generously given up their time to teach this program. I'd also like to thank the students who've signed up for the program. Some of them have been extremely good. In fact, the overall standard has been remarkable. And if any failed to get in, please come next year. Please apply next year. Hopefully we'll build upon this particular kind of future, build upon this in the future. So I'd like to thank you for contributing, all those who contributed to this. I'd like to thank you for signing up for this. I'd like to thank those instructors who are teaching this, and so on. I like to think that architecture is not just simply about designing and building buildings. It's about imagining a better future world. And with luck, Digital Futures World will contribute to making the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil Leach. Thanks a lot. Neil actually coming to Tongji as a professor in the last 6 years. We collaborate, co-organize the event, and also we gave a lot of support from Dean Lee. And so it's really a special moment for the 10th anniversary, 10th year anniversary this time. So right now I would like to invite Patrik. Are you okay to firstly get the lecture? Please share your screen.
Okay, hi guys.
Ready, but I think Patrik is fine. So
no problem. I've just
finished, right?
Put the last slide into place, and I'm happy to start in a few minutes, because I just wanted to comment also on the kind of strange experience of living as a recluse nearly for the last 3.5 months, and what this means for architecture. Actually, what is interesting to us, we as a firm survived because China is back on track and everything seems to be going forward as normal. I'm not sure if that's for us anyway, in terms of all the projects up and running. New competitions and urban projects, and it seems to be not so much effect. So those who are still in lockdown, they think the world has changed maybe drastically, but I also believe to some extent that there will be new patterns emerging with respect to the utilization of urban space, that the relative importance of locations. But I'm not so sure if I agree with Neil about the withdrawal into suburbia. For instance, for us here, it's actually great to be in the center of town and have hundreds of restaurants to order from, as well as in terms of moving back to the office, actually, and not maybe full week, maybe for 2, 3, 4 days to have meetings and so on. It's actually the ones with walking distance who will be doing this, and those who are relying on public transport, commuting from outside, will be cut off for longer, because that's perceived as a risk. So we will be having the walkers and cyclists. And actually, what is important also, micromobility is starting to kick off. I think there will be, the cars would clog up the city without public transport, but all these kind of electric scooters and roller skates and electric bikes, that will make a big impact. And I will use that as a segue to say, but these kind of equipments are at the moment still illegal. And also all the transformation we might require of converting office spaces into residential spaces, or into live-work conditions, of converting residences into office spaces, even where you might want to meet the client or have a co-worker coming in, all of that is utterly illegal at the moment in the UK. And so that means there's going to be a revolution in scrapping and suspending regulations. And that's what I, as somebody who's interested in liberty, actually like, but also hope. If it's not happening, then these changes will not be able to happen, and we will all have kind of a big loss in prosperity, because we can't continue as we have, but we can't do new things because planners and regulations are in the way. So my pitch is, in this period, if we need to adapt to new conditions, we need the market to open, and designers and entrepreneurs and developers and everybody to be free to explore that. So that was a kind of quick pitch, because it's also what I'm going to show is a new way of working perhaps with robots, living and working with robots and robotic environmental features. I hope the videos will run, because therefore I've kind of reduced them in size a bit. But there will also be the issue in the question, will that be allowed to come on quick enough? Autonomous driving, but also living with intelligent creatures and co-living and co-working with them. I hope that we'll have the spirit of liberty and openness, where we allow some experimentation and not wait until everything is signed off. So with this remark, I want to try to share my screen. Let's see if that works out.
Please.
Yeah. Let's see.
So Patrik, the audience talking about, could you speak slowly a little bit? Easily for the Chinese audience to understand.
Okay. Now I will be more slow. Slow down. No problem. So, wait. That was the wrong presentation, guys.
Yeah.
Here we go. I was now we're talking. I mean, I'm giving too many lectures recently online, so I'm calling it spontaneous AI environments. Okay, is that clearly visible, that slide?
Yes. Yes.
It's all
very
good.
good.
Okay. Good. And so as I start with my usual. So at the moment, what we have, we're living with the products of robots and robotic fabrication. So they're starting to fill some of our homes and places and pieces of buildings, but the robots themselves are hidden away. They are not entering our lives yet. Okay, and I think that's very similar to the condition of the late 19th century, where we had an industrial civilization, and we lived with the products of industrial production in our homes, but we didn't see this machine aesthetic. The machines themselves were hidden away outside the city, and no gentlemen or the upper classes had no contact with that. And I think that, and then if you look at the 1920s, what started, that industrial machines entered in our lives, full on, with cars, with washing machines, with television sets. So we had, the kitchen was full of mechanical devices, and we learned to live with machines. But these were mechanical machines, electric machines. So. And so we're in a similar situation, the world was building up, and this is for decades, like the machinic world for decades. And now my proposal is, and I think we're seeing that just a little bit in Japan with little kind of pet robots, that we should invite the robots into our lives. So, you know, and so not only having the products, but actually having and not having the machines hidden away from the city, away from our lives. So now we have actually robots all over the place producing. We the people actually don't need to be at production anymore. We have moved to the city, and we are all creators. And I think it's important that every single human being can become a creative knowledge worker, because nobody will be required in physical production, really. And the physical production systems, they can absorb millions and billions of innovations. Before, we couldn't do that. There was only space for 1 or 2 innovations per year. You had to rebuild the whole assembly line. Now we just reprogram the robots or re-upload the new software or app, so everybody can become creative. And that means we have this very dynamic network society where all the creative collaborators gather in the city, only engaged in research and development, marketing, finance, creative work, knowledge work, and the physical work is increasingly done by machines. But these machines we're not allowing in our lives yet. So, and we allow these robotic intelligent machines. And so this is something we've been looking at for quite a while. Is that video running? Is that moving? Yeah, okay, good. So this is a very old image from AADRL. The team which did that over 10 years ago is now, you know, belongs to our crop of directors in the company already. So we've been looking at a long time of architectural element, and here is ceiling and wall pieces being responsive and motivated co-actors in these what we called at the time responsive environments. And now I want to talk about creative environments or spontaneous environments, because I don't think they should only be responsive to our moves. They're not remote controlled, but they have their spontaneous intelligence, ideas and offerings and their own lives. And what they would be driven by is by the utility they deliver for us. So we are looking at the work environment in particular, but this is also would apply to urban spaces with autonomous cars and all sorts of robotic facilitators, as well as in the residential communities. But we started the investigation in the work environment, and we are doing big work environments basically in China, where we're doing a great campus for Infinitus. We're doing Oppo new headquarter in Shenzhen. We're doing this one, the Sparebank Technology Center in Russia. We have a lot of these high-tech, innovative corporate clients, but where we're showing some of these fluid work environments. But we, in terms of AIDRL, we kind of have another round of research and design research, trying to develop the next level of that. But again, to show that there is a reality in terms of these mobile and fluid and open fields, where you can imagine human beings roaming around in agile working, where we're not locked to our desk, but we're dynamically interacting, that you can also imagine this to be filled with a lot of facilitating robots, where every door, every lighting fixture, every table, desk, partition, it becomes a kind of living creature which tries to make itself as useful as possible. So this is the Facebook campus, the Frank Gehry project, and we've done kind of sketches like this of continuous interior urban landscapes, where as you see later in the next iteration of this, we try to bring these environments alive. So the idea is that there is a complex environment with a lot of overlap and intervisibility. So it's really a complex, integrated swarm of workers, because we're coming together to exchange knowledge, to exchange skills, but also to match ourselves up and network up into teams and new teams every day. So that's why we need this kind of roaming environment. And we do that, of course, both through telecommunications, through the web and electronic communication, as well as physical communication. So this is the Russian project, and there's a massive floor plates, and we have this kind of fluid landscape, but we also have and operate this across levels. So it's a kind of three-dimensional playing field. And so this just sets the scene for what I'm going to show you later, the way I would like these, and you can look at these, they appear dynamic, you literally want them to continuously refigure. And you want this to take place like in the kind of jungle of robotic creatures. It's a bit noisy. So there is again an image just of the Moscow project. And while we're communicating online, as you can see here, screen in the foreground, we will be both connected up virtually and real, and we need to have many things at view. And but we're continuously shifting our position and connecting up with new collaborators. We all work on multiple projects, and that's why to facilitate this with having thousands of people in such a space, that's very important, where you need facilitating systems which exchange, which help us orient, which help us come together, help us to reconfigure. So this idea of architectural agents or actors who have certain behavioral capacities is very important. And now the important idea again is that these interactions are suggested by the agents themselves. We don't have time and imagination enough to use remote controls to create all this. They need to come to us spontaneously and anticipate what we might need, and maybe randomly keep changing their shape so that we can discover the configurations which might want to work for us. So these were the sketches we had already a while ago, and I think the time is ripe with all the Internet of Things, with all the sensor technologies and actuation technologies becoming ever more cheap, that we should bring these kind of ideas from the art gallery, where they have been for 20 years, these experiments in interactive installations, and where you have data processes translated into reconfigurations as well as real-time interaction, where this moves out of the gallery finally into the real environment, and we're starting to live with these intelligent creatures. And again, this ties in with that this could be inventive forms. The creatures themselves could shape themselves into strange forms, which then allows us to discover new ways of interacting. So I think what is important here, and that's something I'm not going to show today, is that while we play with these forms or let systems evolve and change shape, we need to at the same time imagine and run human agents to see how the human agents would plug in and interact and be facilitated by this. So what I'm talking about is a symbiosis between human and artificial life, and all to maximize information exchange, interaction, so that we don't miss important events, that we don't overlook people who might be relevant for us, that we are, it's a kind of a big matching, let's say, speed dating space in the end. But for that, we need facilitation. So the idea is becoming that, you imagine all these pieces of furniture are robots who have mobility capacities, who have sensors, who have memory and learning, reinforcement learning, machine learning. And there's also overall central intelligences perhaps intervening as well. That's the vision of this project. And again, this is not only, this is also floors and ceilings and lighting conditions. It's an ecosystem of interacting creatures, and we should not forget that, of course, the human agents remain center stage in terms of the truly original and creative work, but the artificial agents are maybe simpler and slightly more less complex. They are still creative and spontaneous in what they are doing. And of course, that's with an architecture that is they're making space, they're gesturing and announcing gatherings, they push people off if they become too comfortable, etc. And they animate us maybe to be more active and be roaming around and maximize our encounter frequencies with others, maximize our communication opportunities with others. So this is work of the DRL where we build both digital and physical robotic models. And again, this is at the DRL experimenting with different morphogenetic processes. The cymatic experiment, the kind of vibration of a surface distributing particles. So these are trying little models of material self-organization, which could be used and might inspire, in this case, inspires a space where you have this kind of gradual transformation from one partitioning and territorial organization into another. So I'm just showing a few slides of this idea of reconfiguration. So all the elements are designed so that, and teased out so that they have many configuration potentials. But again, these configuration opportunities will not be pre-programmed, but they will be spontaneously offered, maybe on schedule or on situational conditions. So this is just one layer, of course. This is the layer of the furniture pieces. And what we're teasing out is here the valency, so that a movement, an individual movement is not so meaningful as much as a relative movement, a simple rotation, a shift. And if that's getting coordinated, you get a radical transformation of the scene, of the social organization, of the opportunity to interact, of the institutional diagrams of and protocols of human interaction. That's what is important here, that we have these switches in social situation and configuration, which are quite dramatic and powerful. And we can also do that on different scales. So the furniture scale interacts with the architectural scale, where there are some shifts in levels, some rotations also in mezzanine levels, etc. And the important thing at any time that we're looking at the human agent, that these are not only abstract, meaningless patterns, but that each configuration establishes a new type of communication, from a formal meeting to an informal gathering for something which involves only a small group of people or a larger group of people, two events fusing, a larger event breaking up into smaller groups, like you would have in a workshop. You would have a very dynamic scene where you come together all in one big gathering, then you disperse in different teams, then you have teams going around and visiting other teams, etc., etc., etc. And for that to be orchestrated, such a intelligent environment thinking along, and where each table would have the responsibility to maximize his or its own utilization. So you have spatial corners who are underutilized, they will start to make waves and move a piece of table or chair which has not been utilized, would feel the urge, builds up the urgency to become utilized. And that's the way you have this kind of, the utility functions driving the decision-making, AI decision-making process of each and every architectural element. And here's a small kind of vision how this would look in a time-compressed, let's say, daily rhythm over a larger field. These kind of pulsating transformations. And in this case, as you can see, there's not much movement across the whole field. It's just local movements radiating or rippling through the field. So we looked at these kind of fields of transformability on a level of furniture, partitions, mezzanines, and when we scaled up and looked at an urban field in North London, and you can see the figures very open, and we tried to activate public spaces, outdoor spaces, in between spaces, between different projects, and have a lot of also agents who operate in the larger scale, so big atrium roofs which open up and turn an atrium into an external courtyard, or big umbrellas covering an otherwise open space, and having facades opening and close, gates and doors, and reprogramming through light and rerouting also the street space and public spaces. And I think this would work better if we had less political infringements on such spaces, but allow, you know, if you think of this as a privatized public spaces in terms of management and running, of course, public in terms of access, you could imagine to do much more than we're now able to do in all the urban spaces. So again, we should remember that what we're looking for is patterns of a complexity and intricacy with so many actors coming together, with complex layering and gradients and fuzzy logics. That is something which, in terms of grasp, in terms of organizing and reorganizing, we need artificial intelligence. The human intelligence would be overburdened, particularly if there was a kind of a continuous retransformation expectation. So this is an interesting project, with a version of this project where we generate these zones and subzones. They at any time are overlapping and reconfiguring. It's a bit like you have sport fields in which you inscribe multiple events at the same time. You know, this is a football field, a volleyball field, a tennis court, and a basketball field, all in one layered over. And all of these events could take place one after the other. And they inscribe that kind of condition into our urban environment. But now imagine that all of these fields are at the same time also kinetically transformable, even to consider that the events that, inverted commas, take place simultaneously, that you have both a football match and a tennis game and a basketball unfolding, metaphorically speaking, in an urban environment, in an interior urban environment, or urban environment for that matter, like this. And that we can utilize also phenomenological effects. Now you see it, now you don't. Wherever your eye is roaming and searching for patterns, you find a pattern. So this is a kind of so-called multi-stable pattern. These kind of effects could become productive for a kind of quick shifting over of organization, even if it's initially only in the mind of the observer, who can then log in and find these patterns. So they translate into a more simpler geometry. You can see many different scales of circles intersecting ovals, and that's very fruitful. And now this kind of idea drives a very intricate, beautiful urban field with a lot of continuous reconfiguration, where also subsidiary groups shift allegiance. And again, this happens on a local scale and doesn't even require that the furniture travels much. Maybe it's just a simple rotation or slight realignment which triggers these gestalt switches. And again, I think it's important to see this, of course, always with human agents picking up on these patterns, picking up on the gestures, on the offerings, and completing the figures and making the events happen one after the other. So you can compress and layer let's say, many more meaningful encounters and events and meetings into one space, which you normally would need to maybe 3 or 4 times the space, and the human users have to move from their desk into the smaller meeting room, then into the conference center, and all of this is laid out adjacent to each other rather than layered on top of each other, which is much more space saving. But we're not only talking about space saving, we're talking about the importance of intervisibility and co-participation. Through the edge of your eye, you can see what's going on, you might participate. Much more intensive than now, where a conference takes place away and invisible to where you're sitting at your desk. So that kind of communication intensity we're looking for. By the way, I'm also, and that's not part of this talk, thinking about, imagine that you have screens, that tables are at the same time screens, and into a virtual world, that partition walls become large screens into virtual world, which continues this interaction with the non-present, with the virtual presences in kind of fusion of real space and cyberspace, something I most recently have been thinking about. So here you see that, again, these pattern shifts are connected up with human interaction and human usage and human, of course, social processes, which are productive processes. This is these sessions and meeting and exchanges which allow you to solve this problem and upload that news app to billions who now benefit from that. And then and 5 minutes later, you make another decision that you're reprogramming the robots and generate a new kind of product. You refeed the 3D printer. So that is happening in real time, potentially innovation after innovation after innovation. And again, there is a multi-stable urban pattern in which your eye switches between the different larger space segments. And again, the attempt to bleed out into the urban and activate the urban outer spaces as much as the interior spaces. One more project which operates a lot on a simple form, which can kind of connect up into larger forms and operates primarily on rotation. And I mean, so you see that this intelligence, that artificial intelligence, is premised very much on the body that is imbued with intelligence, very much on the geometric and inventive designers' creation of the body and their robust and simple navigation and movement capacities, so that then a lot of effect can be generated. So it is not a disembodied intelligence, it's an intelligence which attaches to what we always know how to do, how we can make designs that offer a lot of utility and affordance, but also offer, in this case, a lot of flexibility of reconfiguration. And so here's how that might be embedded in a overall space. I hope the video is running. So you get the sense of these open spaces, visually connected, and the continuous reconfiguration of furnishings, of ceilings, of partitions. And it's unimaginable that these kind of transformations could be humanly controlled, simply because nobody would know what the overall configuration should be, could be, and nobody can, in a sense, integrate all the local intelligences and adaptive creative moves and learning processes which will be taking place in such a system. And I think what I find fascinating to reflect on is that such environments, and particularly if some of those intelligence are wedded to particular hardware infrastructures, they had unique learning curves. They have integrated a unique set of experiences, some of which they could share with others. But if they also have different and unique bodies, because each robot could be a new version with 3D printed parts, you end up with something which I find very charming and also very beautiful. You end up with artificial creatures which have a uniqueness as a human being would have a uniqueness, which is not easy to simply copy because their intelligence embedded maybe in distributed networks where they compute and store some of their memory in some kind of server networks. And again, how quick and how well this happens depends on the particulars, but also they had their own learning experiences. So they really become personalities of a sort which perhaps deserve some respect. And to the extent that they might not become reproducible, they deserve also the kind of protection of a moral, become part of a moral universe, perhaps. So I think these are fascinating thoughts when we start, and I think we will, and maybe anticipating some of Yansong's ideas, we will also be able to attach, form emotional attachment, not only to the spaces, that's for sure, because that's where we made our experiences. That's where we have beautiful or horrible memory, but also with all these pieces of equipment, these robotic life forms, which we will form bonds and likes and dislikes around. So I think that's another thing we should remember. And I just wanted to show you that, for instance, at DRL, we are doing these kind of projects in teams, 4 teams, 4 projects, trying versions of a similar theme, and then actually in this case integrating these 4 projects into one campus to have, in fact, kind of an urban district emerging. So this is the last of the projects. Again, I want to show you this is another project. So this becomes an urban district, and quite deliberately, the idea is that we have a lot of exterior spaces and we have a lot of integration of existing buildings. So parametricism, as well as tectonism, and with this idea of a semiological, phenomenological, and artificial life project, very much is not a tabula rasa, but is also something which relies on prior human institutions, on prior patterns of interaction we find, but also prior urban spaces, urban fabrics, which in a way have accrued some kind of robustness and intelligence also. So all of these projects are very much integrated and woven into an urban fabric with existing, but also with each other, generating urban spaces, activated spaces. So this is a kind of vision of a new knowledge industry, network society, urbanism, which will be robotically infused. So we have the robotic furniture also roaming around on the outside, maybe intersecting with autonomous driving, etc., etc. And that's why I think probably such things will happen first in free spaces and enclaves like Milton Keynes right now in the UK with autonomous driving. But we need to allow this kind of experimentation to take place. So just maybe show this final video.
Patrick, you lose your voice, your sound. Maybe.
Is it, say again, what?
Yeah, better? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think that was all. I hope the video was running. I'm not sure. This was my final slide anyway.
Okay. Almost finished.
So I give you back the screen.
Okay.
Stop share.
It's great. Thanks a lot to Patrick. I think it's really interesting. Patrick is present the whole lecture from a kind of bottom-up process, behavior simulation, and the formation process, how to generate the form by different kind of fabric pattern. Actually, it could be from a certain kind of tessellation, two-dimensional geometry, and update to three-dimensional furniture or human behavior performance system, and finally to the architecture skill as well. So it's totally a very interesting design methodology, which hidden behind a certain kind of a thinking methodology, I think. So in the past few years, more than 10 years, Patrik is also teaching in ADRL. I'm talking about that's like a big army. He's training the army, and the army finally goes to Jaha office. So I think the special character for what Patrik doing, actually, he has certain kind of teaching methodology, define how to organize the thinking machine to generate not only in the practice, not only in the learning process, but also goes directly to the practical process as well. That's really interesting. I think we could make further discussion later after Ma Yansong's lecture. So Ma Yansong is almost finished his PPT. I should invite him to join the WeChat group. Just wait a moment. Okay.
Yeah.
My answer is coming. Good.
Good, great.
Some question in the okay, good. Finally, Ma is coming. Great. Would you like to test the computer? If you can sharing your screen right now.
How to share my screen?
The green button, 共享屏幕.
Yeah, at the bottom line, there's a green button.
Yeah, the green one. You just press the green one and make option.
Okay. PPT, right?
Yes. Please, they give the screen to you.
Yeah, it's all happening. We have it. Great.
Okay. Hello, Patrick. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Good to see you, man.
Okay.
You changed your title.
Asia and Future.
Okay, good.
Professor Yuan asked me to talk about this title.
远古的未来.
I wasn't so sure why I'm in this conference, but I know not much about the digital, but I can talk about my work and my understanding about the future. So my title was Asia and future, because I think it's not meaningful to talk about the future without talking about the past. So I find in a lot of projects that we have done, we discuss about the time and space. So I'm going to show several projects that we have done. This was a competition in Paris. You know this tower, right? The Montparnasse tower. Yeah. That was a black color high rise, and people hate it, and they want to change the building. They want to bomb the building. They couldn't, but so they launched the competition, and that was our proposal. We make the new facade for this building, and the new facade is actually a optical device that reflect everything around the building, but reverse everything. So the surrounding, the reality will be upside down when it reflected onto the facade. So from this angle, for example, the Eiffel Tower will be upside down, and they were surprised by this image. But I think the issues for us was why they built this tower at the first place, why this high-rise was ideal architecture in 60s or 50s, and why Eiffel Tower was the landmark at the beginning, because Eiffel Tower was tall, was a great structure, was a lot of steel, and people think this is a landmark, and it's still a landmark now. But after the first landmark, like Eiffel Tower, we built more and more towers as a landmark. So maybe this is a mirror that help us to think about the our behavior right now, and also what we have done in the past. And also some projects, for example, this one, when we practice in Beijing, is Asian city, and this courtyard house. And you see those bubbles in this model. That was our proposal, to make those new space to hold new functions in those objects. In this case, that was a toilet inside the steel bubble, and then we can insert this bubble into any courtyard house. And this is the first bubble we finished. By the time we complete the project, the neighbor, there's a neighbor who really loved Asian architecture, and he came to us, and she said, "I hate this building, and you don't know anything about the beauty of the courtyard." But but I think as an original Beijing person, I know the beauty of the courtyard was actually not the building itself, but the empty space inside the courtyard, and the trees and the sky and the land. So as long as you preserve that relationship and the structure, I think the new architecture can be new. And this is second one we built. So we continue to grow this structure in the city, and every project, every space can be different shape, different size, and when you drop this into different environment, they reflect the surrounding in the very different ways. So for me, this dialogue with the existing structure, also the nature around it, is a task for this new building. This also this a kindergarten house we built in Japan. It's a very tiny building, but you can see this wood frame structure inside this model. It's actually original house, and then we enlarge it by building a new envelope around it. So that was original structure. And when they start this construction, they have this ceremony, which is really moving. It's a very tiny project, and not many people, but they were so sincere to the land, to the sky, to this event, because this building is so much related to their life, because that was their house for generations already. So that was part of the reason I decided to keep the structure inside the building. And the new building is a larger, and it's a different look from the original house. Look like this, but inside you see this old wood frame as a part of the structure, and the new structure is attached to the old structure. So why we're doing this? I think the technology was very easy. You know, we keep original material, and we save some budget, but more important is the building has a memory to what it was before, and the kids who grew up in this kindergarten will know where this building come from. So I think this memory or emotion in the architecture somehow related to how you practice in this way. So it seems like there's no fixed method for me to do this architecture. So this one is actually the roof of the old building, and this space in between the new roof and the old roof become a classroom. This is a new envelope. This is opera house in Harbin. We completed maybe 4 or 5 years ago. There's two buildings. They all merge into the horizon, which is really a big landscape. There's a big river next, and there's a wetland park around the building. So we decided to make the building so curvy that merge into the river landscape. So that's the top view. So there are two theaters. There are two objects, but we blend all this space into a linear element, which is continuing in this landscape. Also, this linear element become the facade, and then the landscape merge into the plaza, merge into the ground, where people can actually walk onto this facade and climb the building from the outside. And that's the ramp where people can walk around the building. So when the building closes, when there's no opera, they can still enjoy the building from the outside, and they can reach the rooftop and look at the sky. So for me, this building doesn't matter what the program for this building, as long as it's situated in this environment, it has to talk with this surrounding by continuing this experience when people walk in the wetland park and they want to maybe climb this ramp and reach the rooftop and look at the sky. So the building is really low. You feel the building is low and approachable because there's no orientation, no strong facade for this building. Every angle is it's very low. And this is a night view, and we want to make the building glow and very open and transparent. And inside we use this material. Well, actually, it's a wood, local wood from this northeast China, and they normally use this to make furnitures and in this local area. And then we use this craftsmanship to make it organic and sculptural staircase for people for audience to to be a performer. When they come here, they walk through the space, feels like they're actors. And inside the building also there's symmetrical. Somehow I think there's a lot of a symmetrical layout in this building is somehow classic for me. Maybe the way I'm doing architecture is also classic sometimes. I use a sketch a lot and then models and then a lot of orders in the layout, in the plan. And we bring the natural light for the rehearsals during the daytime. And the interior wood is a natural wood. It's also work with acoustic engineer to make it very warm and natural and good acoustic performance. This is another opera house we're building in another city, in actually a southern China, Yiwu city. It's in the lake. So this time we want to make a building very light. Also, we try to make the building without a shape. Of course, there's a geometry, there's a material, but by making translucency, maybe we can, and the layers, maybe we can make building disappearing into the environment, also blur the skyline of it. So we want the building glow from inside and floating on the river, and it look like very light junk. Inside, again, is a symmetrical, and we use a glass material also for the inside. This is quite challenge to make it acoustic working. Want to make it very heavy and strong, but at the same time, feeling very light and transparent. And for the concert hall interior, we also play with the light. We want the natural light coming from the top, and all these acoustic panels look like a fabric, very light. So how to make a heavy building feels light? I think that's a challenge for this one. Next one is a tower. It's a sketch came first. You can see there's two towers, and I draw the river at the bottom, but actually there's no river. It's in the city. But I was imagining, what if we have the mountain in the city? So this is a model we make. The two towers on the right, on the left, and the several smaller buildings on the right, to make a urban valley space. So the smaller building feels like a natural rock, and then the river flow in the middle. And this when the building complete. It's actually has a lot thought about the site, about this location, because it's in front of a park. And normally around the park, building tend to be a wall to facing the views. So I think that's normally how we how we understand about architecture. Architecture is a man-made, and nature is something else. That's the relationship between the two. But in our case, we want to make our building as a artificial landscape. So there's a conversation in between the nature and the man-made. On the other side, there's our building facing the CBD area in Beijing, where you see the towers, CCTV. They all look like really strong monuments, a machine. I think that's a kind of like a battle scene for me. That the city and nature, who wins? Who get the more? Can nature survive? But here, actually, I'm not talking about the number of trees. I think I'm talking about when we build a city, that's already artificial. That's already, you know, involve a lot of space, material, technology. But how can we bring the emotion that we normally enjoy in the nature into the architecture, into the city? And this is quite interesting painting that was created by a Chinese art critic. He photo collaged all this modern architecture into the classic paintings, and he put the CCTV, bird nest, all this modern architecture, and he also put, I mean, in this painting on the far right, you see this small, tiny black mountain. That's our building, actually. He put it into this painting and it looks quite nice. I think it fits the painting somehow. Maybe that's the dream. I was dreaming about our city, that to create overall beautiful scenery by, you know, inserting some architecture piece. So this building without neighbor buildings look quite nice, actually, with the trees and lake. It doesn't really fit to the neighbor somehow from some angle, but I think it's interesting that when you talk about different contexts, the building behave differently. And so for me, that Asian context become virtual now, but at the same time, it's the ideal context. It's even could be a future context that we want to create it for our environment. And this some latest photos that the building completed. It's quite a direct translation from my first sketch, actually. All these lines, they're columns inside, and also each vertical line is a chimney, actually. At the office space can open the window to get fresh air through this space. It's actually a green building, but it doesn't look like. Quite a look, I think, somehow strange. So this overall, mountains, rocks, for me, and the river in the middle. So there's also an apartment building in the middle of this valley space, and this valley space is open to public, so people can, everyone can come into this valley and you know, sit there and have a drink. And also the detail of the building, these balconies for that apartment tower is also translated from the hand sketch. So that's why we do some hand sketch, and that's quite efficient somehow. Sometimes you can do it very fast, and just make sure don't rationalize, don't rationalize, and just directly use it as a building. Somehow it's the result can be interesting. There's also this in the same period that I was imagining to making a lot of mountains in the city. So this is another project in Nanjing. This is a model that we make. All the towers look like a lot of mountains, and that as a backdrop of the city. And this may be the early this year, and they're still continuing. It's quite a large in scale, and that's the reason this becomes somehow a mini urban space. there are 13 towers, and we put all these towers around the perimeter of the site, and we connect all these different plots by bridges and walking streets. And in between all these towers, instead of making plazas, we create small villages. So by making really high dense but low rise building and the courtyards and the trees, and we can make the urban space quite comfortable in terms of the scale, the human scale. And well, actually, when you enter this space, you don't realize there's several tall buildings around you. And then all this architecture, it doesn't matter, it's office, it's a hotel, apartment, we all covered this glass strips as they also function. They functions as a sun shading devices, but more important, I think, for me, is to cover all this building as a backdrop of the site. So they don't characterized as a building. They don't show functions. They become the background. And this background could remind you waterfalls or mountains and whatever natural elements or natural experience that has nothing to do with the city. So that's was the original concept, but somehow it's also functional. So this, for example, this one is it's an elevator tower that detached from the building. So in this inside the building, there's no core, and people can take the elevator, and the elevator stop every 3 levels, and they can enter the building through the bridge where they have a natural light. They see the beautiful view, and they can meet each other inside the building. They have a 3-level atrium. So that also changed the structure and the spatial organization of the architecture as well. So mountains for me was ancient in that case. And here, so the time has a different scale. In New York City, we proposed a tiny apartment building next to this Empire State Building. The Empire State Building was classical and the landmark and monumental, everything. And we had this opportunity to make this glass apartment building, but it's really small in plan. It's almost like a temporary structure that cannot stand. So so we tend to make the building really light and not perform as a new monument in the city. And so it's very small in plan and very tall, and the top of the building it's actually disappearing into the sky. So it's because it's a black material, glass material, and we changed the color on the top of the building into transparent glass. That was the idea, but the building not going to happen, I think. They stopped. But I think the idea was to make the building that doesn't show its intention to be a monument. So but at the same time, the transparency of the building could create this new relationship in between the skyscraper and the sky. It doesn't hurt the sky, but instead it connects the sky by making itself disappear. So that's the skyline of the city. So you can see most modern buildings, they look so strong, and some have some building has a really this needle peaks. And I also imagine maybe the tall building can also say it wants to connect to the nature. Because sometimes I feel, you know, when you do a single floor building, a 2-floor building, it's easy because the tree is bigger and you can you can blend into the nature. But making tall buildings, bigger buildings, you know, how it can be beautiful building, but how through this structure, human can show this appreciation to the nature and the environment. I think maybe that was a try. Another project in the United States, that was in Los Angeles, a Lucas Museum, now under construction. It was a horizontal building. I think it looked like a cloud for me, but I mean, the cloud, there's a lot of stories about the cloud, because cloud is formless. It's a water, material is a water, but the geometry is so always changing. That's why there's so much imagination about it. There's so much stories, poem, music about those phenomena. So I was thinking, what if when we land a cloud into the city, into the reality? So we put this building kind of a formless. It has a form, but it doesn't show quite clear the geometry. It's a horizontal building floating above the horizon. And also we create a park on the roof of the building. It's not really floating, it's an arch. There's a gateway into they call this exposition park, where you have many museums around it. So there's an arch as a entrance to the museum campus. So on the two sides, there are a lot of trees and landscape, so the building feels like floating. That's a gateway. And also through here, people can enter the lobby of the museum, and there they can also look at the sky. I think sometimes the sky is very important in many projects that we are doing. And all the galleries is in the elevated portion, and every visitors will come into the lobby and take elevators and you know, go to the heaven and then start their journey up there. And also this some moments you have this you know, floating structure above the water. You know, this all this imagination about the cloud. We want to bring this experience into here. So sometimes I feel nature is ancient. You know, there's or a lot of stories around the nature. And that's because nature is not a fact. It's not a science. It's not a physical. It's all about people's reception about the nature. They understand the nature in different time, very differently, and that's create some cultural and narrative imagination through the cultural context. And somehow I think we should respond to that. That's the sum. This is also a new project in Quzhou, a Chinese city. They want to build a sports park. So we built all these green volcanoes and buried all these sports facilities into the mountain. It's quite large. So inside these mountains, there are stadiums, swimming pools, and they don't have a facade. They all become a green park, and people can climb those buildings. They can go to the volcano top. So in this case, architecture disappeared. Instead, it become experience. And what this experience is, an experience in the nature, but this is quite different from an urban park. This is nature, but it's also different from the real volcanoes. It's also different from maybe some land art park. So I think sometime when we borrowed some emotions from ancient elements, in this case, volcanoes, and bring some imagined experience, a new experience, and put them together. There's a drama happen, and that's inside. That's easy. That's I mean, this is a challenging structure, but it's all buried inside. You don't feel from. And they all each volcano use a different structure. This one is it's a swimming pool, and we use a lot of natural light and using this bubble concrete shell to put them together. So in order to making the space, it's really challenging and need to adapting a lot of new research and the technology. But for me, I think this all has to be abstract, new experience in this ancient form, the volcanoes that people feel they're familiar with volcanoes, but they can never get into any volcanoes, and so there's a lot of space to imagine. And this is a kindergarten we just completed in Beijing. This top view, you see there's a colorful roof around one building. This one building is a 300 years old courtyard house. So it's being protected, but at the same time it's connected to the new building. So that's an old building. And there were some new buildings around it. They look like an old building, and we decided to demolish them because they look so fake. And then we make all the space around it a new kindergarten, but keep them single floor so they don't look too big. And they also have a courtyards in there. So that's a completed views. So that's the connection in between the new and old. So the old courtyard house also become part of the kindergarten. So kids can run from new space into the old space, and it's quite clear which one is new, which one is it's old. But when you go up to the roof, it's become a new dimension, because you never can see the old city, old building from this level. You will see all these roofs, and you can run and play around it. It's quite fun. But I think in this case, the time is a key. Why we want to demolish the fake old. We want to keep the real old. And then we want to build the real new, so you will have real things together. But the relationship, I think for kids to know which time they live in and how they should look at the history, I think that's a key in this environment. This one is a new. This is a project we are doing in Rotterdam. It's on the ship dock of the Rotterdam waterfront. That was an old building. It was an old warehouse building, very long building, 2-floor concrete structure, and people depart from here for America during the wars. So there was a lot of immigration back then in this place, and now it's called the Phoenix Food Factory. There's like a industrial building with a lot of young people gather here and the cultural destination. And they want to make this building as a museum for immigration. I think that's a wonderful idea because the origin of this place and the history of the place. And we were asked to make this renovation proposal. So that was my sketch. I made this tornadoes in the middle of the building. I think the building looked so heavy, and we want to destroy the building, destroy the roof of the building, so this tornado can go through the building and go into the air. Also, I draw this funny bird on the roof. That was my impression of the seagulls. And then we make this tornado as a travel device that, of course, bring people from lobby to second floor and to the roof to this sky view platform. So that's the staircase. We make the building, the middle part, really transparent, almost like outdoor, and then a lot of natural light coming in, and then we'll make the staircase continuing from inside to outside. We try to not having columns, so it really feels that the structure floats in the air. And I think the seagull looks so funny because I see the seagull there. I said the immigration museum is really about how people travel around the world. And I see seagulls look same everywhere around the world. And they don't have a trouble as with different kind of the seagulls, and they just be everywhere. Someone questioned me like, how do you know they're same? They maybe they're different. But I think maybe in the seagull's eye, the humans are the same. Why we divide people differently? So so this will be a place for people to gather. And we'll keep the restaurant, all these public functions on the ground level, and we'll transform the second level as the galleries to hold art and the documents for around the immigration. And people can walk around it, this tornado, and go up to the roof. And that's some real architecture drawings. And that's a mock-up. We want to also making this reflected material. So it deal with the old building, right? But it also deal with time in the history. Of course, using the form and light. And this project at the same, we also use a material to make a space that travels through time. This is Japan. This is a map of a tunnel in the mountain. So it looked like this. There's tunnel inside the mountain. There's a river outside in the valley of the mountain. So the reason people going into this tunnel because they want to look at the river from inside. So we built this building, look like an old building. And then when you go into the tunnel at the end, we make this project called Turn Off Light. It's a very simple installation. The original concrete space we cover with metal panels, and then the bottom is water. we draw the river water from the bottom of the river, and then we put it on the floor, so people can take off their shoes and walk on this. I was questioning myself, because already people, when on the way, people travel to this place, already see the river and the beautiful nature. Why are they coming into the tunnel to see this nature? Because it's artificial nature. We create the nature in the very special way, so we can trigger people's emotion about what's happening around them. So this space is actually help people to connect with inside with outside when they're inside of a space, inside a space. I don't know. I cannot explain this too much, because I think for this kind of spatial installation, you have to be there and feel about it. But it's about the light, obviously. I like this project because it's no technology, no form, no nothing. It's but it's at the same time, it's it has so much that people need. I think that's the quality of I mean, anything we created. The final one, this I have to put here because it's a new project we just released. It's a museum project in Shenzhen. This model is the top view. So we put this undulating landscape on the site, and we integrate all these functions into this landscape. And at the same time, we put these strange objects into the landscape. So sometimes you can climb these objects. You can call this a stone or rocks. And so the roof can be a stage. Sometimes it's vertical, sometimes it's horizontal, sometimes it's buried into the land. But underneath this green roof is actually the main museum. This is a central axis, connect the city and the ocean front. I think this also reflects this idea about the time. Obviously, the background you see here is a modern city, which is the Shenzhen about. Actually, a lot of cities, they tend to make stronger and more beautiful modern city, but they belong to one time. They belong to this maybe 3 decades. But sometimes the architecture cannot repeat the present. So can we create an environment where the present absent means you find nothing about present, find nothing that familiar. You find everything strange and unfamiliar in this environment. But at the same time, you also reference some ancient elements. For in this case, stones maybe, but in ancient time there's no stone like this big, right? But in another project, volcanoes, for example. So what's the space inside the stones? People say, this is a stone, this is a sculpture, or this is shapes. But what's inside? That's the key. So if we can bring a tall space like this, And if we can have this open space, transparency, and horizontal, whatever functions inside this structure that bring the new experience to this environment, and people call this a futuristic sometime, right? I don't think futuristic really a term for anything, because it basically remind you sometime later, right? But most time people call futuristic because they never see this before, and they think this is unfamiliar, this is something new, and they call this futuristic. So I think it's important to have this kind of a feeling and put it together with some impression or memory from ancient. So when you have the ancient and the future, and also with the present absent, you can create a huge space, time space, in this environment that people feel lost, right? Because they cannot reference anything immediately, and they will have to, through this sense of the space, to imagine or to try to read what's happening. It's not a simple read. It's not a direct instruction, right? It's not a architecture telling people what it is about, but it's open. I'm telling my story, but when people engage with my story, they will also have to imagine things. And so that's, I think, the at least the key for the cultural buildings, I think, because that's the place for people to imagine, to think about the time and their relationship with the world. But for me, I think this is the really interesting topic when I heard the word future. Of course, this, by making all this happening, there's a lot of technology and the method and the logical things involved. But at the same time, what about the imagination, and what about your attitude towards the history and towards the future? Like at which point you decided to, this is emotion or spirit you want to bring into the architecture? I think that's a question for me. Thank you.
Great lecture. Wow. Patrik, where are you?
I'm here. I was here all the time. I mean,
yeah, thanks a lot to both of you. Give a fabulous, impressive lecture today. I think the key topic today is the dialogue between Yansong and Patrik Schumacher. So I would like firstly give the voice to both of you. Could you ask question to each other? Probably everyone just one question to the other one. And I think that should be the most interesting question you want to ask. Maybe you're very familiar with each other. A lot of competition, made a lot of times in different competition. But today, I think we want to talk nothing about architecture, just about the design thinking, about your attitude, your philosophy in architecture. So please.
Well, I just want to start congratulating to Ma, because it's beautiful work, and I feel very happy to see all the recent projects. Some of them I'm not familiar with. I've been to Harbin, of course, and it's an amazing project. So I enjoyed that, and I can see also the attention to detail and the execution was very beautiful, and the effects. And I spent quite a while roaming around, having the chance to move inside as well, and it really works beautifully. But congratulations! I think some of the projects you just showed are very, let's say, original and very beautiful. like that kindergarten in Beijing, I think is striking. For instance, I love also the New York Tower. It's a shame if that doesn't come forward. And of course, I'm very curious about the Lucas Museum coming out, being under construction. That's a masterpiece as well. So, some congratulations. I find the work very stimulating. And I'm also looking forward to that sport complex, etc., etc. So there's a lot, and that museum, that new opera house in the water is also, I think, it's quite original. So I think I see a lot of searching, a lot of personal engagement of a poet, and I think that's quite remarkable, because also you have a relatively large business to feed and maintain, and you're still picking up rather small projects like that little, Japan tunnel and Japan kindergarten. So I'm impressed. I mean, my sensibility is a bit different sometimes. I mean, but I find it very refreshing to be confronted in this way, and it makes me think about what we should concentrate on. That wasn't a question. That was first just a kind of emotional response. I'm very happy. I mean, it's real architecture. It's a thrill.
Thank you.
And I wanted to pick up maybe some of the themes and ask about. You said that and I understand why. I mean, if you have a purely natural environment, and we very rarely have that. We are at the moment lucky to do a building in the desert, and there's nothing around it. So we can put our profile against the desert profile, and you can see the ripples on the sand, and that's beautiful. And that's a very rare occasion. So you said the ideal context for your work is either nature or ancient architecture. And I somehow, I think my challenge to you would be, I understand what you mean, and we sometimes have that experience. We also would love to, add something to an old monument. And what you really do is the total absence of the present. And the present is the kind of the banal, what burdens us, what imprisons us to some extent. So you want to step out, into, you only have the future, this other place, and maybe you accept an ancient, which is another dream place. So my challenge would be is that, well, what I would say, is that an escape? Is that a kind of refusal to engage with the present?
Maybe.
And maybe we should refuse.
Maybe I'm thinking, I think it depends. To be honest, it also depends what kind of projects, what kind of a work. Of course, some work you have to deal with daily issues, and you're supposed to solve the issue now. But some projects, maybe it could be meaningful for long term. So I think that's probably more ideal for me to do. But I think it's hard for me to find a method right now. I think because I have when we think through time or talk about the history or cultural things, you can have a strong response that you cannot refuse. That you have to do this way. But in this process, it's lacking of I don't know, method, because each time you react differently.
Well, I can see that and I like that. Say you're quite versatile, but I think there are also themes which come through for me. I mean, and I think there must also be a strong conviction of projecting that artistic will, because when I look at what you've done with that kindergarten in Beijing, for instance, that very other and organic and nearly extreme intervention coming super close to an ancient monument, similarly to those polished blobs in the close to the Forbidden City where you're doing those. And these are radical juxtapositions. And I think that I find that stimulating, but it also demands nearly that the absence of that contemporary banality. So I think these projects share a lot. Also, what they share is the poetry of strange form and the avoidance of too easy. Actually, for me, it's the avoidance of that classical moment. Yes, you have it in the inside of the opera house, perhaps, very, very rare occasions. But I think it's an attempt when you sometimes said you like it that has no form, or you like the cloud is formless. In the avoidance of simple identification and in an attempt to create something which is other and strange. Of course, so I think that is a kind of method, and of course you end up working with curves a lot, but with a lot of irregular nature-like curves. But you always make strange. I think it's very important that suddenly either it becomes black shining, or it becomes polished, or becomes white suddenly. I feel there is an artistic method. Maybe you haven't. Maybe it's intuitive rather than explicitly laid out.
So Patrik, you have done a lot of research. So what do you think about this relationship in between the research method and the emotions, the humans, like spiritual?
Yeah, and very much so. So, for instance, the way I'm trying to drive the work. On the one hand, is transformation of parametricism at the earlier stages into what I call now tectonism. That I think it connects up with our aesthetic sense and sense of beauty and wonder in two ways. Because when we now saying things like, when we use the latest engineering processes. At the moment, I'm working, for instance, with DRL strongly on topology optimization and developing structural forms. And then when we look at various fabrication technologies and robotic fabrication, what I love about it is the diversity, and I'm not sure. So it becomes nearly very rich and multiple. It's the endless forms of nature which we can start to approach. But again, it's not a random sample, it's quasi-natural. And I like when you said you don't want to rationalize the hand sketch, we are very much want to rationalize, but this rationalization is not just a clean geometry, it's using logics, particular geometric logics, whether it's a tensile form, which is anti-clastic, or it's a certain shell forms, but they could be irregular. They're never a kind of simple symmetrical form, but when you use compression only with over an irregular footprint, you get something highly rigorous and beautiful. And then when your tessellation comes in, that's also coming out of the process which fits. So I've discovered that we can find an overlap between something which is highly rationalized, and that rationalization, of course, needs a high level of skill, including engineering skills, that this increases the sense of beauty because it is making strange in a new way. Because when we're looking at new materials and new methods of fabrications, like 3D printing, for instance, and we like the tool path and the line. So there's always something which I seek within there, which is not ideas I already had, but coming through material processes and technologies, and they have the rationality, and that's for me an artistic medium. Of course, we still have to select and iterate, and we have an aesthetic engagement, but that's the methodology to always look for, and we don't have the time always, but particularly with the research, one strand of research is in terms of the characterfulness and particular quality of these conditions, and then combine them. For instance, to combine in a project tensile forms with compression only shell forms, with maybe curved folding where you need conics and sheet forms. And when you or when you use hot wire cutting, which is only ruled surfaces, they're similar in their way, but they all have unique identities. And what I realized when I combine these, I can generate larger projects with more diversity and unity at the same time. So that's my methodology to say, and of course, let's say, rather than using only Maya and Maya modeling and the tools which are available there, then you have to, it's harder to get that diversity of expressions, which I think we eventually want across our oeuvre. But also I'm thinking about, and that's maybe the last point I want to make, if we wanted to do a larger project, and we have been thinking about, we're doing big Tencent campus or Google campus, maybe at that point we wouldn't be able to, one single process or idea could bring it home. For instance, if you're now doing that Nanjing project and you have a very large project already, which more or less one idea, one geometry. So I think that becomes questionable. So I think this methodology of tectonism maintains the unity. It builds on engineering rationalities and economic rationalities I anyway have to address. And it gives me that diversity and gives me that artistic repertoire. So that's why I'm promoting that way of working. But of course, it's not easy. I've been thinking, and we've been working this for maybe over 10 years, and it's not necessarily in all our projects. It's maybe only, it moved from 20% of projects to 40% of projects. So it's not something which is easy, but it has method. And yeah. Philip. He's silent. So I feel in this, so Philip Yuan is a kind of, let's say, congenial protagonist in this search. And but I have a lot, but also I think he's also a poet, and I think I respect you as incredibly fertile. And I think if you think about it, I mean, you are actually you are very much like Zaha actually, in terms of the kind of this kind of drive for poetry and otherness, and each time a new thing. And I think that's very important. I've always needed that bounce back, and that's why I feel very stimulated by what you're presenting.
Thank you. Oh, what's next?
Well, I mean, I want to so the places, let's say, what I'm thinking about as well. We have these places where you go, like a museum or opera, where you step out of the ordinary, and you want to have a transformative experience. You know, think about yourself and what to do with yourself. It's nearly like you sometimes even have this with a movie. You watch a gripping movie. You need that. You need that. You know, every month and so on. And I think similar for me is when you go into a place like Harbin, or you go to a special place, it suddenly opens up. I think that's a very important role of architecture. And the question I have is, I mean, it's difficult, but you know, you saw I'm a lot of interested in working environments. So they're kind of very ordinary. So have you thought about this as well? Can this kind of interventions appear in more ordinary programs? You know, in a corporate campus, in an office building. Now, I think it can, and more it should, because the work becomes less routine. So that's something which I'm interested in, and how this is actually this moment of being pushed out of the kind of routine or the ordinary and opening up an imagination, as you said. I think that could become useful in then how you redirect your life. I mean, I guess you yourself, you're a creative knowledge worker who's producing a lot of value, and I guess you need to be stimulated. But it's not only the two of us; we need to be stimulated. And as I said in my talk, a lot of people will now be able to work in creative industries. And they need that stimulation. So I think and let's assume, I just wanted to challenge you in terms of how about the more ordinary places, office spaces, schools and retail places and residential places.
Well, actually, we just finished one social housing in Beijing, 4,000 units. It's quite large, and it's all prefabric construction method, and it looked quite different from other buildings we built. But also different.
Could you inject any poetry there, or was that difficult?
I tried very hard, but it's quite limited. Quite limited.
Actually, that's interesting. We're doing that as we're struggling as well right now with something similar, which is student housing in Hong Kong, and that's also stripped bare. But we're trying something. We're going to do something.
I think for people who live there, their experience must be much better than the other buildings. But somehow I have to convince myself that's the ideal space. I really I feel satisfied.
Well, I mean,
like Le Corbusier Marseille building, I like it very much.
Yes. And we generated in Vienna that building has some charm and social housing also. I mean, that was also very unusual. Sometimes you can make it, and Vinnie Maas is very good at doing something transformative with social housing. But it's tough, and I think not every architect. We also sometimes step away from conditions where we feel there is the banality of the everyday is too powerful there's no room for transformation, then we should step away. But our intuition, and Zaha's was always also, initially we always want to be saying, yes, let's do it, let's look at it. And so that's why we would also do low-cost housing. We actually had some very nice sketches for a micro housing in London, but it didn't get planning permission. But of course, there's again, because the units are far smaller than normal, and these were modules, you get another sensation again out of it, and you had lots of shared spaces. So that it is important sometimes that the place, the social institution, and the client body, there's something original about their life as well, so that you can match up and add your architectural interpretation towards a little bit different about them. I think that's important. If the client and the institution and the life is very much standardized and very much preoccupied by expectations, then it's not easy for us to come in and just to do something superficial is maybe not interesting. So, but I think we always felt that, let's say, the art museum, these kind of projects are great, and we love them, and they're public spaces. But they're also some of that should spill over into more generic components of city life in terms of an innovative injection.
Yes, I think especially for the social housing. I mean, there's no reason they only deserve a better room. Right? That's a community, the feeling of community, the artistic quality over there. Because this social housing, we also try to bring in a lot of artists to do the community art pieces. So as maybe it's like art, like open a museum. Like we try to convince authority that the art is also important for social life. You know? So maybe at that moment the design matters, because otherwise they don't think.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I mean, I think there could also be low-cost housing with private client, doesn't have to be public. What I find, I'm not sure how in China. I mean, actually in Britain, in the 50s and 60s, and even into the 70s, there was a lot of innovation and transformation with in the space of social housing. A lot of new typologies. I mean, that was the modernism flourishing, very inventive. I feel now, if I look at that kind of housing in places in London in particular, it lost that space. So because everything is over standardized, and there's a lot of moral pressure and a lot of, let's say, community engagement, where maybe there is worry if you want to do something different with the resources and so on. So I feel that although there's good standard quality, that inventiveness which we had is lacking in there. It is partly with I think it's maybe it's too democratic, meaning one is scared to do something which upsets expected standards. So I'm looking forward to a moment when one can do also low-cost, innovative housing with private clients. And I find, I don't know about in China, but I feel that in China, 10 years ago, there was more openness and less regulatory strictures. If you think about China and the way they were able to mix retail office and residences and in their buildings, I think that's no longer possible. So I worry about Europe is high. You know, the space of artistic injection of and innovations, which needs both an architect, but also needs an entrepreneur and developer or an institution to make a special offer that in that residential space in the UK, that's far less innovative and adventurous than it was 50 years ago. I don't know how it's in China, but we're not doing much residential in China.
Mm.
Patrick, I have a question to both of you. I think from my perspective, it's interesting. Actually, you have a lot similarity, although it looks quite different. Design flow, thinking methodology. I think it's kind of a linguistic style, which is really similar in both of your practice. So I'm interested in ask one question to the two office. How many projects are you doing right now parallel, totally number in Jaha office and the MAD office? Can you give me the answer?
Maybe around 20.
Okay. Yeah, I think probably 60.
60. Okay. So I think from my perspective, I think the ways of how the office control design it's really interesting, not just on the methodology perspective, but also how you run the office and how you become emerging in the market. It's really important from my perspective. I think Yansong is like a quite humanism, because his mindscape actually control all the projects. It's like he needs to involve into every project, because it's like a creative process. He engaged to all the conceptual design and to the construction process. I mean, in Jaha office, in Patrik, your team, you have sometimes 60, sometimes to 100, I think extremely busy. It's impossible, I think, as a humanism, the human designer, to control so many projects. It should be controlled in a different kind of way. So, I mean, Patrik is trying to use a kind of intelligent, automatic design working flow to control an even bigger army. So, although the style to me is a little bit similar, it's kind of a linguistic style to represent certain kind of motivation or certain kind of concept, but the ways how to control the design working flow is totally different. I mean, Patrik's methodology, if your name is methodology, is more like collaboration between machine and human being, because your student from AADRL, it all becomes a small Jaha, small Patrik, who can play a leader roles in a small team, and then could be parallel going on to make a lot of creative, stylistic process, followed by some kind of geometrical or the linguistic style. But I think the things, the project in Yansong's design, although it's kind of a super realistic or surrealistic style, it's kind of quite, you mentioned about the ancient, it's certain kind of presence and absence, present and absent. It's kind of quite absent in the present. It's kind of contrast, very strong construct. Goes to original feeling, original future you want to create. That is kind of creative process is really need time. Maybe if you don't want to change a very stylistic style, you need to make every project different. So I just wonder, because Yansong mentioned you have 20 projects, also a big number. how could you control even more projects if you want to make every project unique? Do you think it's possible by a human brain to create all this kind of uniqueness in every project? Do you think it's kind of a permanent or sustainable ways in your office in the future?
I think it's very, very hard. It's harder and harder. But there are, you also hear the story like one songwriter suddenly write a song in 1 minute, finish 10 songs one night, and they all look like they all sounds like beautiful. I don't know. It's it will involve a lot of work, of course. But also you need attention, and you need maybe the quantity sometime to make you focus.
Yes, that is something I think I want to argue with both of you. I think Patrik is in the past 5 years, we have a lot of discussion with Patrik, and he's also teaching in Tongji PhD program. What he is trying to create is a certain kind of collaboration between the creativity from human being and the intelligent machine. I think although it seems from a humanism perspective, it's not a mindscape you're creating, maybe it's kind of intelligence-scape you're creating. But I think it really matters about the productive process for the office and for the mass production, because if you visit the whole world, how many Java projects everywhere in different country, different culture, which is parallel constructed at the same time. I don't know if Yansong, when you become more and more successful, probably MAD style project will be in Shenzhen, will be in New York City, in Los Angeles. If MAD future goes to Java office future, is that you're going the similar style but different version? I just want to ask a question on that.
You asking me?
Yes.
Yeah. No. It would be too early for me. I think I'm still enjoying making different things, and because I'm not so sure about what I exactly want sometimes. And this accident or randomness, super interesting for me. So I don't want to lose this.
Well, for my part, I actually would like to, and it's not easy because the world market is not infinitely large in terms of the kind of projects which have a certain scale and innovative ambition. I would like to grow the firm further. So I'm targeting kind of Foster, and Foster is a great example for me. And I visited also the office recently, and you know what is great about this size of firm, you can have multiple research teams, you can feed and build new capacities, and in order to maintain that innovative edge. He's also going out to collaborate, even with similar characters like Philip Block, etc. So the way I think this larger firm can stay innovative is to build set up these platforms of innovation. First of all, it's very important, the connection to teaching, not only myself, but many others in the firm. And then to have research groups. We now have 3 research teams already. And my role is, yes, to always look for the next step and stage. I'm not so much, and I do, of course, think about projects. What I'm doing is looking of where are in all the projects which are coming in. And there's every week maybe 5 new projects or 10 new project opportunities to select from. Which of these is the right opportunity? Not only to be somehow financially viable. That's one filter. But I can look at it and say, which of these gives me the chance, and I know all the different players inside the company, to do with this or that team that kind of innovation. So where is this project for instance, for the mega atrium,
Yes.
or where is the skeleton, or the cluster tower, or the where can we do more shell and tensile structures? There are a number of themes, or where can I try out the next level of this kind of in interior urbanism. So what is important for the size of the firm, what is great about is to get many more, maybe at 60, maybe it's even 80 project opportunities. And then and some of them you will have to, in the end, do something what you've done already. But there will always be some of them where you can try out something new. For instance, when we might do an all timber tower, or we might do we're now doing an all timber stadium and looking at that. So that's the advantage of the larger firm. And I'm not afraid that I can personally design all of them. I mean, you can look at all of them, even during coronavirus, so that people continuously uploading onto my server folders, things I can look at. And yes, I can't control them all, but I don't have to, because we have a very trusted group of, let's say, collaborators, creative collaborators who've been around, who've been students, have been around for a long time. And you know, my role is to distribute and to research new avenues, and to be an interlocutor, critic with some of the creatives who are working. So I feel this way we can. I can imagine doing the same thing with 1,000 people rather than kind of 450 people. So that's why I want to go the Foster, where I'm not afraid of. And it's more about the culture internally that we're not going to allow, and so far we don't have anybody who wants to turn this into a purely commercial thing. So all our project directors, whether they're directors, associate directors, or senior associate, they still have that hunger. They want something out of it. They have that pride and ambition, and that's so that doesn't have to be me, but it's a kind of congenial cluster. I mean, Mark could have been part of this, and there's been some of, you know, and the summer is too. They need their own thing, but we have a lot of characters who get that space and feel that they can do participate with original contributions. I mean, that's also makes for some diversity. So I think that's for me a satisfying, very satisfying kind of project. I just would hope that the world was more dynamic, with Europe being kind of in stagnation, America going into recession. Dubai is no longer the engine. The only thing we're relying on is China. I mean, Asia, including Hong Kong, Macau, and India, is now like, with all of Asia, is now 70% of our work, and China is 50% of our work. So anything going wrong in China, we are kind of, but I hope we can grow, maybe we can take some of a big bite from some of Foster's market share.
I think it's a very interesting talk between Yansong and Patrik, actually, which goes to what I mentioned: what is humanism, what is post-humanism. I think as a human designer, to design someone like Zaha Hadid and someone like Ma Yansong, I think, is kind of a uniqueness, artistic creativity to create a certain kind of a sensitive mindscape would be appreciated as an icon or as a special figure in the history, to be a hero in the design world. That should be a lot work. Probably should do less projects and do more uniqueness to create a certain kind of artistic future as an architect. So that's a paradox, probably which matters the skill of the office and matters the numbers of projects, how many projects they're doing simultaneously. I think that should be critically thinking on how many energy you have. At the same time, from a post-humanism perspective, I think the intelligence of the creativity from the human mindscape, can that still compete with the collaboration between the intelligent tools and the human being? I think it's kind of new authorship. Maybe in the humanism, the authorship is still the human mind from a unique figure designers. But in the post-humanism, the authorship maybe goes to a team, maybe a research team leading by certain kind of roles, who can set up like an army, which can set up some special collaborative relationship between the human being and the intelligent machine. That will be probably a totally different future, because I invited Anthony Picon, who also will give some talks next week. 2 years ago, we made some discussion on that, about the future authorship in design office. I think maybe Ma Yansong, probably you're the last generation. Still, we admire as a kind of a human figure who can really use some certain kind of creativity to doing some certain kind of uniqueness by the human brain. But probably the near future is already coming, is the new artificial intelligence, which actually can totally engage into the not only the design process, but also the construction or fabrication process, which can give the new authorship. If you want to compete, maybe the partnership, you have 2 partners right now. Maybe the future partnership could be between like Patrik Schumacher with different robotics and different AI engine. I think that's probably a different criteria. What is the great? What is a future hero as an architect? I think it's difficult to say, but I want to leave this as a question to all the audience. Probably we have 2 heroes today here. Both of you very successful. I think you have some similarity, but you are quite different. But from my perspective, I can read maybe probably the way how to run the office, the way how to make a design, the way for your future probably could be totally different. But difficult to say. We want to wait to see what's happening through your career, because your project, which will be constructed in the future, years by years. So what kind of future is difficult to say. Ma Yansong mentioned about the ancient future or original future or the unique future. And Patrik Schumacher has mentioned something about, I think, kind of intelligent, emergent, this kind of future, which is, from my understanding, is called like a certain kind of automatic society based on certain kind of domestic economic rules, which is more a big scenario, social networks recreation, and also certain kind of a toolbox-based collaboration between human and machine can make a special holistic future. The architect maybe probably play a role to integrate different kind of resources, different kind of methodology, different kind of process. So that is a totally different, although have different orientation, similar orientation, but I believe you will lead your office goes totally different direction. It's different, totally different. But I'm looking forward to see what's will happening in the future, because the essential methodology or the philosophy is actually 100% different. So thanks a lot for the dialogue today. Would you like to have any feedback? Any more feedback on that?
Like just very short. So I think authorship will not disappear and will be attributed to machines. But in this, what I see is the authorship becomes more collective and will be attaching to a brand name. And that might be standing in for an open source community like Ethereum or Bitcoin, or it might be, and there is a kind of collective responsibility, or it's a corporate like ZHA. And that would be in the world what the attribution will be to ZHA. We stand for something, we have a certain set of values collectively, we take responsibility to collectively. Some of that is attributed to me as a personal, but in terms of actual project authorship, there's many different people and teams, but we still need, we're not going to directly give responsibility and authorship to a machine, even though machining systems come in. But I think the big shift now is between an individual author and more of a, let's say, a collective brand as author. In the domain of architecture. So Foster and Partners, Richard Rogers Partnership, ZHA, and the kind of the model of, the older model is, Frank Gehry. I mean, in reality, in terms of legal responsibility, it's also, of course, Gehry and Partners. And there also might be in their teams which have a lot of creative input, but it's still credible because of the kind of that personal engagement and control and final responsibility, where nothing would come which isn't kind of controlled closely, where I would be somebody who's standing back more, and we're actually quite comfortable with a let's call it a brand authorship, and then we're working on that brand and the ingredients and what it stands for more loosely, and that will be, Zaha passed away and ZHA is still there. I mean, actually, Zaha, although she was a creative genius, a personality, in reality, behind the scenes, she let a lot of that happen as well. Much more than Gehry, Liebeskind, and other figures would have let happen. But I think, what's important is that these brands will not die. They have eternal life potential. Not really eternal, but you could have, most of the great German firms are over 100 years old, for instance. So that will be, and of course, in each decade, there will be a new interpretation of that. Maybe there's a Karl Lagerfeld stepping into Chanel, etc. But that's where I see authorship, not machines. Machines will never stand alone, but of course they become more and more important. So why can we have 100 projects? Because it's more systematized. I mean, we're not that corporate that we literally have standards and mechanisms of a kind of a recipe book, like you might have in corporation with 100,000 staff. We're not, and maybe shouldn't be, but it's more in that direction. No matter how many machining systems we have, I think it's going to be a brand authorship. And yeah.
Yansong, any
I think something wrong with your logic, Philip. I think it's not a matter of the number of people and the number of the size of the group. I think that the thing is how meaningful, how meaningful your work is, because sometimes a great artist can work alone, and the work can be meaningful. But sometimes, for example, Elon Musk launched his rocket. There's 2,000 engineers work together. It's a big number compared to any architect's firm, but it's a small number for such organization. So sometimes your work needs people, but as long as your work is meaningful, everyone is helping you, including people, experts, and also the robots, right? The tools is also helping you. It's but the thing is that what you do has to be meaningful to many people. It's not because you're the boss, you're paying people. It's because people think their involvement is meaningful. So I think if you need more people, then let's have more people. It's no problem. But it's not, still a big group can be doing meaningless things, but same as a small group, right? So it's I think managing is a technical issue. Like you can have experts, software, and helping you to manage the teams, but it's not the key. I think that in my eyes, the technology it's also a tool to really help you, and together with a human.
Great.
I need help. I need help because I'm weak, right? You cannot do anything. People helping you because you're weak. You have to know that because you're not ordering people to do this and that. I think.
I mean, leadership is not necessarily authorship of each individual project. And that's the same when you have a great dean of a school. He's not even doing all the teaching. There's a kind of meta leadership which I aspire to. So it's not that I can't do a project. I'm actually love designing as well. And once every 5 years I design something. So.
I know some great artists. They're crazy. They have great ideas, and they don't know how to do it. And there's a lot of people helping this guy to make.
I think one thing I totally agree is the value for not only the individual but also to the office is really important. What is the most valuable things to you? Yansong, could you just use one sentence to conclude what's the most valuable, what's your believing in architecture? Could you say something on that? What do you believe?
I think challenge myself and the people around me.
And Patrik?
Well, I believe in architecture as a means for social utopia, but also an imaginative anticipation of social utopia. I think that when we love an architecture, we're imagining a life we would like to have, where some of the crap we have to face up every day is falling off. But I think that should be a realistic dream. And that's why I want to tie it in with understanding how society evolves. And, I'm looking into political and social theory, something which is possible. And then architecture is somehow involved in imagining and bringing that about. And that's my thing.
That's the key difference between both of you. I think it's totally different. My Yansong is always chatting himself. And actually, Patrik is trying to set up a certain kind of social utopian future. So that is one inner to the inside of your mind. Yeah, that is Patrik is going outside to challenge the social system. I think it's kind of philosophy, different philosophy, really interesting. So right now, I think it's around 11 o'clock.
But the funny thing is that I see some of these utopias in Mars work.
Yeah. Okay, understand. So I think, what time is it in London, Patrik? It's 4 or 5?
It's now 4 o'clock, 3 minutes to 4.
Great. I think it's okay. Okay, tomorrow we'll start the workshop. Great thanks to Yansong. Give a fantastic lecture, and we can read in more deep to your spirit. I think it's a great opportunity to listen to your voice, and also great appreciate Patrik Schumacher. You give us a lot of support to our program, Digital Future program. I think the most important thing I want to highlight is Digital Future. This is not only the 10th year anniversary, but also the special time post-pandemic era. The prominent architect like both of you give us a lot of support, very generous support by your time, and also your sharing your vision. I think will help spreading out to a lot of audience, students, architects, which help us to give us more confidence in this kind of very special era, and gave more like a certain kind of light in the future to the young generation. It's a lot contribution to the social process. So really appreciate what you're doing. Really appreciate the special dialogue between Yansong and Patrik Schumacher. It's a great thanks to both of you. Great chat and great talks. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the audience. Stay with us. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, bye.
See you later, Patrik.
See you, sure.